Okay, doing something a little different today. Have you ever wondered why the world feels very unreal some of the time? Why you go online, you interact, and you feel like something's fundamentally wrong with the medium. Then you go outside, you see a pretty tree, and like 12 cars drive past immediately, and you feel like this is wrong just intrinsically. Something's wrong about all of this, right? I'm sure you have. I at least have felt that way. I've been to school dances or like school prep rallies, high school prep rallies at a school that I feel very like atomized and isolated in. And everyone's cheering, everyone's having fun, and I try to engage. I try to engage with the medium, right? However, it just doesn't happen. I feel excruciatingly alienated, and like things don't match up. I'm sure sure other people have had that experience too. I think that's where the idea of the absurd comes from, and a couple of other things. Uh, so, so it's time for a crackpot theory that I've developed about why this is. Okay, I am editing this video now and realizing I'm going to need to make this a 2 or 3 part series. So this part is actually more about how like ideas and things get removed from their original context and kind of reclassified. It's somewhere in between like a theory about how different mediums work and how uh, like simulations or and simulacra form. And it could be synonymous with either of those two things. I just don't know enough about them to make that statement. So enjoy the video. The next one should be more about how individuals are a part of that experience. This theory revolves around digitization, anesthetization, and digital zombification, which is a thing online. At the end of this video, we're going to analyze why people are using the internet wrong, why the internet is the biggest at the end of this video, we're going to analyze the biggest contradiction within the medium of the internet. So stay tuned for that. I'm looking down here at the viewfinder of myself. This is a different setting. I'm not used to this. So let's start off with digitization. So starting off, we have a thing. Can be anything. Can be an idea. Can be a thing that's gonna be made into a physical item. Can be really anything. Um, and I call this a diffuse or goopy thing because it's it's like an idea of a thing, but it's not necessarily as rigid as like a solid idea. This thing exists outside of our immediate understanding or immediate ability to grasp the thing in itself, right? Whether that be an abstraction or the actual thing, right? So we start out with this goopy thing, this thing made of absolute goop. Um, and then as soon as you want to do anything with that, you basically have to immediately make it real, make that thing real. It's in the world now in some form. It's either like a physical thing, or you have like fully formed out the idea. This whole thing, this is a real thing now. Now that I've taken this goopy idea, this goopy thing, made it into a real thing. I call this tactuality. This thing is now tactual. Look at this thing. Look at this thing right here. It's tactual now. And what I mean by that is like tactile and actual, right? It's apparently an antiquated synonym for tactile. So I co-opted that for my usage. Um, this thing has now become real in some capacity. It's tactual because it's fully realized in some form, and it's available to the senses. It's available to the human senses. It's available to its environment. Things can interact with it. Things can engage with it. It can be shaped by its environment and shaped by the process. This thing is become. This is no longer like an abstract, or it's not an abstract thing. It's not like a tightly controlled thing. It's in the state of becoming, and also can be realized within that state of becoming. So it's a kind of being as a substate of becoming, if that makes any sense. It doesn't really matter if you don't care about that. I'm drawing a distinction here between process and lack of process, which will become important later. But really, this thing is in some state of becoming, whether that is like actively working towards a different state, or is has become something but is also available to in its environment. And I think there's a couple moves from this standpoint. From this standpoint, this look at this thing, this real thing. You have a couple things you can do with this thing, right? abstract it. I'll go with that first. And then it becomes an abstract thing. It's the essential oil of the thing. You get the essence of the thing, you get the senses of the thing, you understand some of the more quote unquote fundamental properties of the thing. Um, Both the real thing and the abstract thing are boundless, right? They interact with their environment. They can be shaped by their environment. They can shape the environment around them. They are in a state of process, right? They are engaged with process in some form or another. Even if it's just sitting there, it's still processual because it can interact with other things around it, right? And it can be interacted with. However, if we move back to this real thing now, this thing is real again. Editor's note, this thing is real now. It's no longer abstract. If we move back to this real thing, we can then digitize it, right? Which is a fundamentally different move from abstracting. Whereas abstracting is taking the sense of the thing and getting the like more fundamental structure, the more elemental parts of the thing, and then containing them in your mind, and kind of washing them around, and that's unbounded, right? We're moving back to abstracted things now. Editor, move back to abstracted things. Move back to abstracted things. Uh, this abstracted thing is unbounded. It doesn't have any real boundaries to what you can do with it, right? It's now just a kind of an idea of a thing. It's a more realized form of a goopy thing, right? It's not actually real in the way that we use the term real, use the word real, but it has some understanding of the thing is contained within the abstraction of the thing, right? Moving back to the real thing right now. Now we're back at the real thing. You can also digitize this thing, right? This thing can be made digital, um, and this thing, when it's digitized, maintains its reality. It still exists in some concrete form in the world. It's not like abstracted. It's not just the senses of the thing. It's the real thing, just contained into a. It's like put into a subcontainer now. I drew a bell. This is a bell jar, by the way. This is a bell jar. You can't see it because I did a bad job drawing it, but it's a bell jar. This thing is in a bell jar because it has a firm barrier at this point. The thing inside of the bell jar cannot be like changed really. It was made real, and in this state, it maintains a link to the process in that it was at some point made into a real thing. However, that process is entirely in the past at this point, right? It's no longer a thing in a state of becoming, no longer a thing in a state of process that can interact with its environments where its senses can intermingle with other senses, right? It is it's basically frozen at this point. It's put into a super freezer, and it is now just what it once was. The state of that thing, now that it's frozen, will either be maintained or broken, but it can't be changed because it's only related to its past version. In this way, it's kind of an embalming of the thing into what it once was to make sure that it never becomes something else. It never uh, like directly interacts with something else. However, there is a way that you can interact with these things, right? These things still exist. These things are still real. But the way that you access them now is by reference. You reference the thing, um, and say that this thing was real, is or was real, and it's now completely detached from any process that the thing once had in it, right? In its creation, completely detached. It is real. It was real. Doesn't really matter even. But it's real now in some capacity. Another property of digitized things is that the senses are now less accessible. Let's say that this thing still exists in real life. It's still real. You can still go look at it, go point at it, but it's detached from the original process. So now you have an understanding of this thing existing, but you don't understand that the value was created by the work that went into it or the process of it becoming something. It's now just a thing in and of itself that has like kind of intrinsic value to it, and that's how people treat these things. It's dissociated from any sense of process, right? Sippy cup time. Let's start out with a diffuse concept of a song that you want to create, right? Uh, this thing is not realized. It's not abstracted. You might have some senses of it, but those are not the senses that will be like realized within the final form, right? So you want to make this real. So you go and do that. So you pick up your instrument and you start playing the music, right? The process has begun. This playing of the music is entirely well, made of process, right? It is in a state of becoming right now. While you're playing that music, things could happen outside of you that um, influence the way the music sounds, or emotions could rise up, and the music could be played in a different capacity, right? This music, while it's in a state of becoming, is a tactual thing, right? It's immediately available to the senses and available to the outside world. It can interact with the outside world, and the outside world can interact with it. From there, you want to distribute this music, right? You want to give this to more people than we're just in the recording studio. So how do you do that? Uh, I want to make it clear that digitization is not just a like web-based online process. So let's say that you press this into vinyl, and that's the only way it's distributed, right? Um, this thing is now digitized. It's removed from the immediate form of process, right? It's no longer in a state of becoming. It has become at this point. People listening to this music will listen to it and go, "Wow, this is amazing that someone played this." However, they don't say that this music feels like something that I could influence as much as it could influence me. They don't have direct control over it anymore, right? They don't have immediate access to this thing. This thing is now on vinyl. It was recorded and pressed to vinyl, and now you have a copy of it. So it is bounded. It is bounded by the vinyl and by time in this way, right? So this is a this thing is now digitized, right? This is no longer processual. It is now past tense. It's contained. Um, let's say that people really like your band in particular and want to signal that to other people. No harm in that, no wrong in that, right? So they put your logo that was the container for your album onto a shirt, onto a shirt, onto a bunch of merch. They start selling that merch. This is now just reference. There's no connection to the process of having made that music. This thing, this shirt, now just contains a reference to the music, and it, importantly, it's not a reference to the making of the music. It's just a reference the uh, uh, to the container in which the music is in, and the container has now kind of fused in part with it and become similar to the actual thing. It's no longer fully accessible. All of the senses are gone in this form. It's just kind of a massive meaning. This shirt now just has like the appearance of meaning, has relation to the thing that was created past tense. However, it has no relation to the process of making this music. So it's a signifier for the outside world that this music has some meaning. However, this shirt contains no meaning in and of itself, right? It only references outside meaning. Taking another example and using this as a way to show that different mediums are more or less susceptible to this, let's say that you have a diffuse or goopy idea of something you want to write, of a book that you want to write. This is your idea for the book you want to write, right? And you are self-actualized, so you go and write that book. Now, I believe that process exists in both the writing of this book and the reading of it on the consumer's end. And this is interesting because just a book on its own, you will always have to sit down with and immerse yourself in some capacity. Those words are not going to happen on their own. Like music will play on its own even if you don't interact with it. However, the words on a page exist in some half realized, half like it's a different form of process than when you were writing it for sure. However, it's still a process. The reader is still engaged in a process when engaged in your work. And I leave it to you, the viewer, to figure out where the problem is in my logic here, or name this as a different thing if this is a truly different phenomenon. I think in this example, you need some outside energy to remove the process of reading this book, right? I, of course, this can come in like the example of conversion to a different medium. Like an audiobook, I think is digitized at that point. That's a digitized form of a book at that point. It will play on its own. It's not like immediately available to you impacting it and it impacting you, and it will happen on its own, right? Or it's a some like external social awareness of the book, which in that case is also kind of a conversion to a different medium. It's just a conversion to like social outrage in the example I've given here, where the reference is just like referencing the book. Let's say it's a perfectly benign book, but now YouTubers are referencing this book as some like moral downfall of Western society. With that, the process of digitization is finished. We're done covering that. So I hope you understood all of that. So you can see here, we've got a little bit more information in the ramble to go over. So take a bathroom break, get some water, get a protein bar or something, and they'll see you here for round two.